Dabo Swinney came out and he had his press conference following the first, live scrimmage that they had.
Yeah, they get 3 live scrimmages during the spring. This is the first one, and they'll have another one, and then the spring game counts as the third. So,
right. So their first live scrimmage that he had, and he kind of justified it as kind of a half scrimmage, and he talked about a couple key points coming out of that scrimmage. I know he mentioned Antonio Williams and how he had a great day. He caught a touchdown pass. I think Cade Klubnik did pretty well in the scrimmage. He talked about the first thing I want to touch on that he really talked about that we can dive into is the offensive line, right? He talked about the offensive line and kind of how they're playing a little bit of musical chairs along the offensive line. We're missing a couple pieces along the offensive line. So kind of what was your takeaway from Dabo kind of making that comment about playing musical chairs along the offensive line, it being a real, work in progress, something that they're, trying people at different positions and figuring out certain people's strengths. And, for me personally, that sounds like a little bit of worry on the offensive line. I know we're missing a couple key pieces in Marcus Tate and
Walker
Parks, thank you. And Walker Parks, couple huge pieces that we presume will be starters next year. So we are missing some key pieces along the offensive line, but it is a little worrisome to hear your head coach refer to your offensive line as musical chairs. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's the thing about the spring. You're going to hear a lot of, it's good. The thing about spring practice is that that's the time where teams do the most experimenting, and they try to find where guys fit the best. And I think the goal for this offseason, at least for the offensive line group, I think that's always been the case for this staff, and what they want to do is they want to build that depth. And we've talked about it in the past. It's last season's offensive line, I thought they took a huge step forward, especially the starting 5, but the depth was still kind of questionable. And when you had guys like Marcus Tate go down, there were some struggles, and obviously Jordan McFadden was playing with injury late in the year. And so when you really didn't have that depth you could rely on and go to, it kind of hurt Clemson in some games down the stretch. So I think the goal for this staff is to really start getting guys prepared. And so while, Marcus Tate and Walker Parks being out isn't ideal, I do think it does give an opportunity for a lot of the guys, deeper in the depth chart to really get some work in, get first and second team reps, and get a lot of action. Guys like, obviously Tristan Lay is probably the most important guy as far as who we're looking at this spring. And Dabo's had some really positive comments about him. But even on the interior, guys like Trent Howard and Bryn Tucker and Mitchell Mays, Ryan Linthicum, Dietrich Pennington, guys like that have not really played a lot of ball, are really starting to get more reps and get worked into that rotation. I think that's huge for building depth, building continuity. And I think it's a good thing because, Garrett Riley, he's the new guy in the room. And obviously he's not the offensive line coach, but he does oversee them, obviously, as the offensive coordinator. And so he gets to see what guys work best together and what the specific skill sets of his entire room is. And so I think it's beneficial in that way as well. So, it's probably not pretty at times if you're at practice and watching it, but I do think it's going to be a helpful thing in the long run.
Yeah, obviously the idea, and we've talked about it in the past, right? We talked about it leading into spring, coming out of the season. We talked about, the issues that Clemson had late in the season due to injuries along the offensive line, right? We talked about when, we had really big injuries on the offensive line. Guys behind them could not step up and do what they needed to do. So it is encouraging in that sense, what you're talking about, building the depth, getting reps for a lot of young guys, maybe getting reps for some freshmen or some guys that, have kind of been around a while and haven't necessarily been able to get on the field a whole lot or get a lot of game reps. So that is a good thing. But part of the worrisome part is, these guys aren't getting all the install and the stuff. We got a new offensive coordinator coming in, and although Dabo has said that we have, it's kind of the same, philosophy on offense, a lot of the terminology and stuff is changing, but that can be made up with mental reps and stuff. I'm sure those guys are sitting on the sidelines when they're not in treatment, when they're not doing things to recover from their specific injuries, that they're really getting those mental reps and studying the playbook and all that kind of stuff. But there's no real substitute for being on the field running the plays, right? So there is a downside in that. But I do agree that we could gain some things in developing some solid offensive line depth, which is what we have lacked in recent years, right? It's when we suffer, you go back to last season, when we suffered the injury of Marcus Tate, right? It really affected the Clemson offensive line, right? We saw it in real time in games. So that is a good thing that we can develop the depth. And we hope that that translates into, something that could be beneficial to the team. Should we encounter, God forbid, an injury to a key offensive lineman this season, because injuries happen. You can't control them. They happen all the time in college football, especially major college football, and you have to be able to adapt and overcome those injuries. So getting these guys some early reps in spring could be a good thing, and hopefully these guys are healed up and ready after spring. They can participate in the summer workouts and really getting into that stuff, and then transitioning into fall camp in the season. We really hope that they can really improve from that and go 100% into the season. So it looks like our offensive line has some question marks, but there's also some high praise coming out for some of those young guys that you mentioned, Lithicum and stuff like that, coming from Dabo Swinney. He's seeing some stuff from those guys. So that's always important as well. We need guys behind those solid starters that we're thinking of. And I guess the best way to find your best five is to play a bunch of dudes at a bunch of different positions and figure out who's the best guy, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I will say, and one more thing before we move on from the offensive line, and it really just kind of applies to the room in general. I do think it was really interesting how, and a really good sign that Dabo was really praising how quickly the team seemed to be picking up a lot of stuff. They were able to, from what he said, they've been able to install a ton. And so, that's either a testament to the, or both, a testament to the learning ability of this group, or the simplicity of Riley's system and how digestible it is for this group. So, I think those are all, really good signs. And so it makes me feel a little bit better about the guys that aren't playing right now and aren't getting reps, because I do think there's a good chance that when they're ready, they'll have enough time to really get acclimated and pick it up pretty fast. So I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.